All right, I'm being detained by USAID Cairo.
What's he saying? Stay here.
They were laying in wait for us. They've blocked the car, and now they've suggested that I'm some sort of terrorist. Then they know better than that. You know, if I go dark, you'll know what happened. Someone inside the compound, USAID, had connections with Egyptian state security, and the next thing you know, the Egyptian equivalent of the KGB, the brutal Egyptian security service, shows up to take over the whole situation. Now, why would they respond like this? USAID was clearly not shut down, and I was reporting that it wasn't shut down. Is USAID Cairo involved in some nefarious stuff? Welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton, live from Prague, a Prague hotel boardroom, which they have so kindly let me use. Now, today we're going to be talking about my adventures, my misadventures at USAID Cairo, the United States Agency for International Development. At least that's what they say they are. And the very last post we did on Ideas Have Consequences was a YouTube live event where I was telling you about how I had gone by their offices and what had happened. Now, that was the first time that I had gone to their offices, and it was an interesting exchange. It was an interesting occasion. But I went back a second time, and all hell broke loose on this second occasion. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about that. And I should say that the YouTube live event that I was doing in Cairo. And I didn't feel that I could really tell you the full story. And now that I'm in Prague, I think I can speak, much more freely. And still, as I said in a viral Twitter thread, I have to speak fairly carefully. So you're going to have to read between the lines and be wise listeners to what I am saying. But let me say this again, for the second or third or fourth time from the outset, because there are occasionally ignorant people who come into the chat, and I'm sure some of them will post in the YouTube comments, who will act like, assume, and it's because they haven't really listened to the show or they didn't really read the thread that I posted. Actually, there's a couple of threads, and both of them have gone viral. I'm not a newbie to this. I have been in, about 70 countries. I was born on a military base. I was raised on military bases. I've been on a nuclear base. I know what security looks like. I've also been all over the third world, all over the Middle East, and I know what security looks like there. I've been in multiple embassies, consulates. I know what it looks like, and I know when something doesn't seem right. Now, you could choose to believe me or not to believe me, and if you don't, just unsubscribe and, go somewhere else. But members of the Posse will know that I'm shooting very straight with you. I'm not endeavoring to sensationalize here. I'm not interested in talking about Elon Musk and his 13 babies or Blake Lively and Ryan what's-his-face. This is not that kind of show. This is a show where we're discussing ideas, the development of ideas, and we're discussing real events and how ideas are driving those events. Now, I ask you to be patient with me because I'm exhausted. I've just been going from one interview to the next. I've been bombarded with phone calls, a lot of questions, a lot of people in power having questions about what recently happened, what I recently stumbled upon in Cairo. So that's the story I'm going to be telling you today. But again, I'm exhausted. So please be patient with me if this all doesn't come out as coherently as I would like it to. But again, I'm at Prague. So now I can speak a little bit more freely to you in a way that I didn't feel like I could. So let's get to the narrative in what happened here. When Elon Musk and Trump started focusing on USAID, I'd say maybe about 3 weeks ago, they were talking about how USAID, and this was a portion of USAID that I didn't know about. They were uncovering the fact that USAID had been funding propaganda against the United States and in favor of, in other countries, a very perverted sexual agenda. So, they're promoting, transgenderism and all these kinds of things. And in the United States, they're, promoting globalist ideology. They're promoting, mass immigration. They're pushing anti-Trump, anti-patriotic, anti-American, fundamentally anti-American propaganda. And this was what they were uncovering. But I began thinking, here really is my opportunity to try to get to them the fact that what they were seeing was just the iceberg above the waterline, that below the waterline there was something much bigger, and that is that USAID was funding the invasion of America. So that sort of sets us up for what took place in Cairo just a couple of days ago. So here I am giving an interview on Banna's War Room talking about all this when President Trump just so happens, the man's incredibly busy, but as members of the Posse will know, he was watching that interview where I was laying out what USAID had been doing in funding, with your tax dollars in mind, the largest human trafficking op in modern history, straight to and through the borders of the United States. And from there, so that blew up, that exploded that whole other aspect of what USAID was doing below the waterline. So USAID has been something that I've been focused on for a few years. And as I've shared with people on this show, I was wondering if the time was well spent, because it seemed like it just wasn't really getting traction. Now, part of the reason for that is because my channels have been strongly suppressed across social media, even on X. But it just felt very strongly that what USAID was doing was evil, that they were causing massive human suffering, both to the migrants by pushing them towards the U.S. border, didn't care what happened to them between point A, their country of origin, and point Z, the United States. But it was also causing massive suffering in the United States, the things that it was doing to people, my fellow citizens in my country, to say nothing of what it was doing in, say, Western Europe. And, it seems like almost every day we're reading about, some kind of awful or crime of some sort that was being committed. And the USAID was very much on my mind. So I'm leaving Switzerland, the World Economic Forum, and I'm going to Cairo. This is just a couple of weeks ago. And I was going to Cairo not because of USAID. I was going to Cairo for a couple of other reasons. And but while I was there, I thought, you know what? Let's just see if USAID, by this time, President Trump had issued an executive order in which he was closing down, he was ordering the closing of USAID offices and recalling all of those employees back to the United States. So I really wasn't expecting the drama that followed. Some might suggest that I thought that I knew that was going to happen. I did not know what followed was going to happen. I didn't expect that to happen, but I decided that I would just pay a visit there just to see, are they complying with the order of the President of the United States. So I went by USAID. Now, bear in mind that USAID is supposed to be like a governmental version of UNICEF or Samaritan's Purse. It's a government benevolence agency. That's what it's supposed to be. Again, United States Agency for International Development, that they're helping people in the third world. Now, let's just, as an aside, put a little asterisk on that. Let us suppose that is really what they are and what they've been doing. Of course, at this point, we know they aren't, but let's just suppose they were. I'm still not on board with that because the American people didn't approve that. The American people weren't on board. I mean, their signage, which we'll show you in just a moment, the signage at USAID is, says US in red or blue. I'm colorblind, but two separate colors. US in one color, AID in another color. So emphasizing the word aid, US. Some people have said, Larry, it's not USAID. Aid's not in the word, not in the name. It is. It's the United States Agency for International Development. True. But the logo emphasizes US aid, and the aid is in it's in a separate color. If you just do an internet search on the logo, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then below it, their slogan is from the American people. So US aid from the American people. That's what they say. So I go there, and we'll show you a little video here of what happens here. First, we approach the barrier. Now, this is a massive complex. You would be looking off to the right here, and the first building you see there off to the right, that is not USAID. That's Nokia. There's some other tech companies there, and we're driving down this road, and we're headed to the USAID offices, and we approach the barrier. And I put my phone away at that moment. I stopped videoing, but we approached, and I decided to see if they would let us in. Now, I do want to emphasize at this point, sometimes people ask me, in fact, people ask me this a lot, Larry, how do you get into the World Economic Forum? How do you get into some of the places where you go? How did you get into the USAID office? I want to be clear, I'm well beyond doing any ninja stuff anymore. My body is far too broken for stuff like that. I have to share this funny little story with you today. I went to see a physician here in Europe, and she said to me, is your work physically demanding? And I said, well, sometimes. And she said, you have the body of an athlete. And I started feeling, a little smug, when she says that. And then she added this in broken English. She said, but it has taken a beating and it is fading. I must say I wilted, rather quickly when she said that. It has taken a beating and it is fading. I've never heard someone describe a body as fading. She's telling me you need to make sure you go and get some exercise and get some of these wounds of yours, seen to. But anyway, I'm not climbing over walls in the dead of night, all blacked out and sneaking into these places. That's not what I'm doing at the World Economic Forum. It's not what I was doing in the Darien Gap, and it's not what I was doing, or in cartel country, and it's not what I was doing at the USAID office. And again, I'm not a newbie, so let me explain to you a little bit of my strategy. If you do stuff like that, it's an invitation, if you're caught, to be arrested, because now you've done something that is unlawful. It's breaking and entering, or, whatever it might be. You don't want to do that. The best way into any place is through the front door. It's through the front door. And if you can do it with a bit of bravado, if you have the self-confidence to approach a door, to approach a building, to approach a place like you own it, like you belong there, I'd say 75% of the time you're going to get in. And this is often particularly true in the third world, because we're talking about a USAID office that is an American office, you see. So it's an American office, and the security there is all Egyptian. So I don't fit the profile of a terrorist. So they see me coming, and we're pulling up in this van in a Mercedes van, which looks like a state vehicle. They raise the barrier and let us come straight through. So unless you're a January 6er, you can't really rightly accuse me of committing a crime if your security lets me in. If I didn't sneak past their security, I didn't climb over any walls, I didn't do any ninja stuff. I came straight up to security. Security opened the gate, and I came straight through. And the same when I got to the second level of security, and then when I got to the third, which was inside the building, they stopped me. Now, you can find that here. We're going to show you some of that video. We we enter through the barrier, and then we're going around these other barriers that are meant to stop a suicide bomber or something. And then I walked all the way around the building, which is because I wanted people to see what a massive complex this is. Now, there's no street view on Google, but on Google Earth, you can see that this place is enormous. It is huge. It is a fortress. So I walk all the way around it, and I'm looking for the front door. The only reason I went around the place was because I was trying to find where you're supposed to enter it, because you see there's no signage on the building, nothing that said USAID. So I finally make my way around. I get to what is the front of the building. There's a security guard there. And I ask him, is this the entrance? And he says, yes, it is. And so I go straight in there. So again, I didn't wrestle their guard to the ground. I didn't charge the place with an AK-47. I asked very politely, is this where you enter the building? Yes, it is. Thank you. And then I entered in. And as I have explained, that in the YouTube Live discussion of ideas have consequences, that conversation inside the building, I could feel intuitively, and you have to rely on your intuition in these things. Intuition isn't just your feelings. Intuition is really the highest form of intelligence. It's what the Greeks called symphysis. It's like your accumulated experiences and knowledge all kind of coming together to tell you something. Now, intuition, can of course be wrong. My intuition has been wrong on a number of occasions. But generally speaking, I rely on my intuition, particularly in moments like this. My intuition was telling me if I hang around here, I might end up being arrested, my driver detained. They were already trying to detain him. So before they could really react, I just said, thank you so much. Sorry that you guys don't want to give me an interview. And I headed straight out the door, got into the van, and we left. That was when I did the YouTube Live event. And some people would say, well, it was very foolish of you to do YouTube Live events. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't put out a video. I thought it was extremely important that I do that, because in part your protection is in getting out some information, so that if something happens to you, there's photographic evidence. There's kind of your side of the story of something that happened should something pernicious take place. Now, I wasn't at that point expecting that. And then I decided to go back a second time. And this is where the real drama in the story begins. And a lot of people would say, well, boy, I've seen this on Twitter. A lot of people are saying on there, this is the stuff of a spy movie, of a spy novel, except it's real. And indeed it is. It's all very true, very real. But again, I want to stress that I've been through these kinds of things and worse before, in situations that I've not talked about publicly and probably won't. But I've had encounters in Ukraine and Russia. When I was in China a couple of years ago, the police summoned me for an interview there, and elsewhere. These things have happened. So on this occasion, I decided to go back a second time. You may say, you damn fool, why were you going back a second time? Well, let me explain before you get all over me and high and mighty about it. I decided that I would go back to confirm a few impressions that I had, but I would stay on Egyptian public property. I would not attempt to go past the barrier, to go past security and enter into the complex. I should be safe there because the security guards are just that. They're security guards. They're a private firm that is employed by USAID and thus paid for with your tax dollars. So there's a hierarchy of officials here that's important you understand how this all went down. So their authority is inside the USAID barrier inside the complex. And I had no intentions of it trying to enter this time because again, I had tweeted about it, and that tweet thread went viral and had, at last count, 12 million views. 12 million views. So I thought, these guys I'm probably on their radar now. They probably know about this. There's probably been a few ass chewings about the fact that I had so easily breached their security the first time. And I'd witnessed one of the ass chewings because security guard, when I left, the security guard from inside the building came out to reprimand the security guard outside the building. And though I don't understand Arabic, I'm pretty clear that he was asking him. You could just tell by the body language and the way these two were interacting. How in the world did you let this guy get this far? How did he get into the building? How did this happen? So now I'm coming back in a different vehicle. And again, I have my phone out to video. And as we're pulling up to the barrier or going by the barrier, the security guards see me, recognize me, and this time they react, but they come out behind from the other side of the barrier into Egyptian, public property, into Cairo itself. And they come out and they block the vehicle. This time we're in a Mercedes E-Class, so a sedan, not a van. And I was hoping that they wouldn't recognize that. And I thought, even if they do, it won't matter because they're rent-a-cops. These are guys that have no authority outside of that complex, but it didn't matter. They came out from beyond the barrier. They stopped the vehicle and they demanded my driver get out.
What's he saying?
Stay here.
Hopefully I'm holding this up properly here. And they're, go ahead, you're fine. They're stopping my driver. They're telling me they want my phone because I have videoed the USAID facility and so forth. I've told them they can't have the phone. So now they're telling my driver he has to get out. So I'm continuing the video, and I can't see if I'm aiming this correctly, so hopefully
see your passport?
And then they took his license, and so they knew who he was, and they weren't going to let him leave. And they told me to get out, and I politely refused. Now, you want to pay close attention to the way I was handling this and what I was doing here, because I've been through this before, and there's a way of handling it. And the first thing is you need to remain calm and not do anything provocative. Don't give them any kind of reason to arrest you or to claim, even just a claim that you did something that you didn't do. So you want to remain above reproach in any way that you can. And no matter how provocative they are, you respond calmly. Now, I'm not saying you don't defend yourself. I think you do. You defend yourself verbally and if need be, perhaps physically. But most of the time, you probably would want to defend yourself physically. You would want to yield if they were trying to arrest you. But anyway, in this case, security cannot arrest me. What they could do is detain me. Now, I would suggest to you they were detaining me illegally because, again, they don't have authority on Egyptian public land, only inside the USAID office, rather the USAID compound. Now, these guys, interestingly enough, because I think they recognize this, they tried to get me to leave the vehicle, exit the vehicle, and go on the other side of the barrier, that is, say, enter into the complex. I refused. They asked for my phone and my passport. They're saying, you're videoing. We want the videos. We want your phone. I said, no. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One thing is, if you ever hand over your passport, they got you. It's just as good as arresting you because you can't leave the country without your passport. Your passport is your lifeline when you're in another country. So, you don't hand that thing over. It asks for my phone or your phone. If you're ever in an instance like this, your phone is your ability to call anybody. I mean, we're not just talking about any photos or videos. We're just talking about your ability to communicate with the outside world. So I said, no, you cannot have my passport. You cannot have my phone, and I will not exit the vehicle. I'm going to stay right here in the vehicle. Now, I wasn't argumentative. I wasn't provocative. I just made it very clear I'm not leaving. Now, my driver was coming and going, who was Egyptian. He's an Egyptian driver, and he was coming and going from the vehicle. So he comes and gets back in the car, and I said, What do you think? Do you think we can leave? I mean, these guys are just security. He says they've made it very clear that if we do, they will fire on the vehicle. That they will fight us, and if we try to leave. So that meant, we weren't going to do that. We weren't armed. We didn't have any, kind of protection, and that's not the kind of scenario that I wanted anyway. What I was seeking to do is to find a diplomatic way out of this particular situation. Again, they kept trying to compel me to come inside the barrier, and they asked the driver. So they did. When I said no, they told the driver, take that car and drive it through the barrier. And they raised the barrier, told him to drive in, and I turned to him and I said, you will not drive inside the barrier. We are not driving in the barrier. And I'm so grateful for the fact that he listened to me and not them. He said, nope, not doing it. And so I was glad that he agreed not to do that. So now they begin suggesting, I'm saying, look, I don't, by your own admission, over the course of me talking to them, they admitted that I had broken no rules. I hadn't entered the barrier, hadn't tried to drive through the barrier. I'd made no threats. I hadn't jumped over any walls. Again, no ninja stuff. I just simply was driving up and I was taking a video. And so they said, yeah, but you can't leave. We're not going to let you leave. Now, they were taking, and I want to stress this is very important, they were taking their cues, their direction from someone inside USAID. They're on the phone. You see, remember, that's who they work for. So the security guards, they work for USAID. So they're on the phone with USAID. A driver comes back and tells me that Cairo police is on the way. So now it's been kicked up a notch. Cairo police is different. Cairo police is just the opposite. They don't have any authority inside the barrier. So they don't have any authority inside the USAID compound. They have it on the outside. And you see, what they were doing now is I think the guards realized they were detaining me really illegally. And since they couldn't get me to come inside the barrier, what they would do is they would call the police. I'm sure somebody in USAID was the one who summoned that. These low-level security guards were not the ones who made that call. That was a call coming from inside USAID and get them to hold me. But you see, then the next thing happened that I was starting to feel like, okay, this is really taking a dark turn. They summoned NSA, that's the National Security Agency, not to be confused with the NSA in the United States. This is the Egyptian secret police, a very brutal Egyptian secret police. And they had been summoned now to deal with my situation. Now, just a little background on who the NSA is. The NSA is the inheritor, they're the successor to the infamous Egyptian ISS, the organization, the secret police that was founded some decades ago, trained by the KGB, and was noteworthy for torturing, murdering loads of their own citizens, to say nothing of other people. Very infamously, some years ago, they seized a man off the street in Milan, I think, and flew him back to Cairo, and then he was executed, as I recall the story. So ISS is a very, very brutal organization, and ISS is their equivalent of the KGB. But like the KGB, that supposedly was reformed and then came out rebranded as the FSB, the ISS was disbanded in 2013 and then reemerged as NSA, or sometimes referred to as Homeland Security, a name they got, from the Americans. And the NSA is made up of all the old, the same people who were briefly fired and then brought back and now populate those positions again. And at this point, my driver was getting pretty nervous, and that is because the NSA, again, the secret police, these are brutal guys. They have no regard for the law, but it was raising questions for me. Where's all this going? Why in the world are they involving the secret police in my case, when, again, by their own admission, I had violated no laws. So again, I'm still sitting in the car. I'm refusing to move from the car. They hadn't forced the issue by trying to physically pull me out of the car, and that's because they hadn't as yet charged me of anything. And I should emphasize here that if I had been an Egyptian, it wouldn't have mattered. They'd dragged me straight from the car and beat me with rubber hoses. But in this case, I'm an American citizen, and I had shown them my passport. I didn't let them take it, but so that they could verify. And again, they knew my name. They already knew who I was. But when I pulled out my passport and I'm holding it, here's the passenger side door and window where I was sitting, and I held it right here and I let them take a picture of it. You want to verify who I am? Here you go. Here's who I know. You can't have the passport. Nope, can't have it. Don't reach for it. You're not getting it. I'm not giving it to you. Here it is. And then they were trying to take my phone. And again, I was holding it, where they couldn't get it. And I said, nope, you can't have it. So it was suggested along the way here that I was a potential terrorist. Now, let's think about that for just a second. White, evangelical Christian, American, not a lot of those guys are suicide bombers. But the idea that somehow, it is at Presbyterians, who are flying planes into the sides of buildings, but, are blowing themselves up in shopping malls. But anyway, this was initially the charge. And the charge, the idea that somehow that I was a terrorist, probably meant to intimidate and frighten me. It didn't, because I thought this is a ridiculous charge, and I don't think anybody's going to believe it. But for the short term, it would give them a blanket sort of power, authority to do with me whatever they wanted, you see. So by accusing me of that, they might be able to, drag me out of the car and say, yeah, we know we don't actually have authority beyond the barrier, but this guy was a great danger. At least we thought he was, and thought he was going to blow the whole place up. But even as they were saying it, their own guys were kind of smirking, like, this is ridiculous. You could tell that even they thought that was ridiculous. But still, that was the initial claim, that they didn't say I was a terrorist. They said I was a potential terrorist. And this is why they wanted my passport and my phone. And again, I said, well, you could take a picture of it, but I'm not going to let you have my phone. You take a picture of my passport. Anyway, and I'm not exiting the vehicle, and I'm damn sure not going beyond the barrier. But by the time that the Egyptian secret police showed up, things started getting a little bit different there. Now, I've told you that these things take a pattern. These things follow a pattern. And in my experience, which unfortunately is considerable when it comes to these kinds of things, if you're dealing with, for instance, in Cuba, when I was summoned by the police to come for an interview by the police, I was thinking to myself, and I told someone who was, going to translate for me, that if we go in there and these are low-level, young officers, we should be in good shape. It'll probably end with them requesting a selfie. And that's the way it often happens, is that they request a selfie. And it's because they often either don't speak English or don't speak it particularly well, depending on what part of the country you're in. And they Google you. And in my case, I'm quite Googleable. And they pull me up and they see maybe an image of me on CNN or Fox News or Al Jazeera or something like that, CNN International. And for them, that means that you're important, that you're a celebrity of some sort, even if they can't read, everything related to you. And sure enough, when I'm in Cuba, they ask me, several questions, all of which you need to make sure you answer by divulging no additional information, because they never ask you, these people, I don't care what part of the world you're in, they never ask you questions they don't know the answers to. So they're waiting to see if you lie. And usually the way it goes is something like this. Why are you in Cuba? Tourism. Do you like it? Yes. What's your favorite thing here? I enjoy the food, cigars. When do you leave? On the 15th. When did you arrive? On the 5th. Where have you been? Havana. You don't sit and start chatting with them. And this is what Americans do. Americans are so naive, they start divulging all kinds of things they shouldn't divulge. And the next thing you know, they go, what? What? You did what? You talked to who? You did what? And then you find yourself in hot water. So you answer the questions very simply. And sure enough, in Cuba, it ended with them saying, can we have a selfie? And so I stand up and they stand on either side of me and go, and take a picture, and that's it. And I'm allowed to go. And the next day I left the country. But if it starts getting kicked up the ladder and the people who are interrogating you are older and more senior officials, officers, then the situation could go sideways for you pretty quickly. And in this case, again, it had gone from the hired USAID security guards who were not police to Cairo police to detain me. Thus, they had jurisdiction to say that I couldn't leave. And then someone inside the compound, USAID, had connections with Egyptian state security. And the next thing you know, the Egyptian equivalent of the KGB, the brutal Egyptian security service, shows up to take over the whole situation. So now I'm looking, this is looking like a pretty serious situation. And my driver is saying to me that he fears that they're going to drag me off into some black hole somewhere. So what I was doing, and I'm sitting in the car, and they're standing outside, still trying to determine what to do to me, because again, they haven't formally charged me with anything, and I'm refusing to leave the vehicle, and I'm refusing to give them my passport or my phone. Again, politely, not belligerently, just, no, I don't think so. You can't have it. So what I was doing was I'm looking at my phone, as I'm doing right now, and I thought these videos might become extremely important because I might disappear here. And if I do disappear here, someone needs to know what is taking place. And as you see in some of the video here, I mean, the driver getting out of the car, and I was videoing that because this was very important evidence if something did happen to me. It's proof that I existed, where I was, and what happened in case I was arrested and disappeared behind these walls. And, somebody wanted to claim, well, we don't know what happened to him. I guess he's just a tourist who knows, might have fallen into the Nile. And somebody could say, well, I don't think that's what happened because we know where he was. So I was firing off these videos, but in the third world, Cairo no less, a cell signal sometimes is not particularly good, but my driver kept Wi-Fi in the vehicle, and it was pretty strong. So I'm connecting to the Wi-Fi and I'm firing off. A text is much easier to send than a minute and a half long video. So I'm sending those videos to my good friend Lawrence Fox, who is my co-host on the wonderful program WTF, World of Taunton and Fox. I'm sending it to him, and I'm sending it to several others so people would know. And I'm sending all the other video, and I'm putting my phone underneath my leg to make it a little bit harder for someone to take it, but also so they can't see that those videos are sending. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, I'm praying, Lord, let these videos upload and send rapidly. Then I shot this video. All right, I'm being detained by USAID Cairo. I'm outside of the gate. They've taken my driver's license, not mine, his. They've demanded my passport. They have demanded, gotta put this down. They have demanded my phone. Again, we've not entered into the facility. We've taken no pictures of the facility on this particular occasion, but they did know that who I was, that I was the guy who was here last week, and I decided to come back to just take one more look. Had no intention of entering, and we didn't. But this time, they were laying in wait for us. They've blocked the car,
And now they've suggested that I'm some sort of terrorist. Then they know better than that. They know that I have no such intentions. I'm quite Googleable. And they were very aware of my my viral tweet from last time. But again, that's what's going on here. So, if I go dark, you'll know what happened.
The reason I'm leaning forward is because I noticed they're very nervous about me taking any video. A lot of people are these days. And the reason they are is because they don't want any photographic evidence of anything that's happening. And again, this is my lifeline, because even if I hadn't gotten any video, they couldn't be sure that I didn't have video. They couldn't be sure that I hadn't informed someone of, because they weren't able to get my phone, had informed someone of where I was, sent texts, made calls. They couldn't know that, and they couldn't know it because I wasn't giving them my phone. And I should also add that at one point, while I'm holding the phone, because the guy's asking me something and I'm holding the phone like this to get the information, and he leans in and he pushes the phone to my face to try to unlock it. But you see, and this is the nature of my work, I have never activated facial recognition or the thumbprint feature on some phones for the simple reason that someone could do precisely that. The information I have in some instances is very, very sensitive, and I don't want them to be able to do that. So in my case, even if they've gotten the phone, you can't hold it to my face, you can't put my finger on it and it open. You need an old-fashioned code. So when he pushed it to my face, I just chuckled at him and I said, not going to work. It's not going to work. You must have a code, and the code is in my head. You're not going to be able to get in. So anyway, after I fire off these videos, I then went in because I started thinking the only way I'm going to get out of this situation maybe is if I can prove to them I have no videos. I have no videos. So I went in and I started deleting the videos. And just in case they had someone who was, iPhone savvy, looking at my phone, I went in to recently deleted and deleted them from there as well. So that's what I was busy doing while these guys are all talking to each other. So you have security, the security guards, you have Cairo police, and now you have their version of the KGB. And they're all talking to each other, and they're all on the phone. They're all on the phone. And occasionally they come over to ask me a question. They say, you work for CNN? Because they pulled up, me appearing on CNN. And I said, well, no, I'm freelance. I work for everybody. I said, as a matter of fact, maybe you've seen me on Al Jazeera. I've done work for Al Jazeera, done work for BBC. I've done work for Fox News, done work for just about everybody. They would go back and you'd see them all. It was almost funny because you'd see them in a line, at the curb, scrolling, looking for me. And another one comes over to me and says, you have a YouTube channel? And I said, yes, I have a YouTube channel. I want saying, you're going to be on it. And anyway, so that was what was taking place. But while they were doing that, I was able to send, delete, and then from the delete file, the recently deleted file, trash all photographic and video evidence. And that evidence was important, ladies and gentlemen, because if something happened to me, somebody like Lawrence Fox would have the ability to say, I know where he was. I've seen the video of them, pulling people out of the car. I've seen them, telling him that he stopped. I could see them, a very threatening, presence. So this is what was going on. Now, one of the things that I was trying to do here, some people have asked, why didn't you get out of the vehicle? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that I didn't want to go on to the other side of that barrier because they were trying to get me to enter an office that was all blacked out. And you see, once I'm inside that office, there's no witnesses of anything that can take place. Now, I'm a pretty big guy, bigger than almost all these guys, but you got several of them and they're armed and I'm not. I mean, there's no telling what could happen inside an office like that. And they could claim that I pulled one of their guns and tried to shoot them, or that I tried to beat them up, or whatever. They could make any kind of claim. And I thought, nope, I'm staying right here in public. And then the second reason I wasn't complying with their request is because I was gambling. I was trying to force the issue. You either arrest me or you let me go. You arrest me and let me go. Now, something kind of funny happened here, and that was while they're talking to each other, I called the U.S. Embassy. So I'm on the phone, talking to U.S. Embassy, and the guy answers, and I tell him, look, this is an American in an emergency. I'm in conflict with Egyptian state security. And the guy says, have they arrested you? And I said, no, but they've detained me. And he said, drive off. And I thought, what a very American answer to give. Now, the guy who answered, I do not think was an American, had a heavy accent, which means probably an Egyptian, but I don't know that for sure. But still, this was kind of an American answer to an American problem. Because, if someone I know called me in the United States and said, Larry, look, the police have stopped me, what do I do? You might say, a lawyer might say, well, have they arrested you? Are there any charges? Then you're free to go. They can't keep you indefinitely. There are either charges or there aren't. And I was trying to say to the guy, no, it's just not as simple as that. You see, you do understand that this Egyptian state security that's involved here. This isn't just, rent-a-cops involved. Secondly, they have indicated that they will fire on the vehicle. And he's just sort of like, yeah, and I decided, this guy's just no help at all. But in retrospect, it's kind of amusing. But here you are, in a crisis situation. And I'm hoping he will kick this upstairs to some authority who can maybe make calls to USAID, because USAID is, at least on the surface, an American organization, right? So you would think that someone at the embassy could call USAID and say, hey, we got an American outside the compound that they're holding because they think he's some kind of threat to USAID. Tell them to let him go. And USAID could call down and say, hey, we weren't threatened by that guy. He's an American citizen. Clearly, he's a journalist. Clearly not a threat to us. But that isn't what happened, you see. So this was our government more than it was the Egyptian government. I want to stress that. The Egyptians were simply doing the bidding of someone inside USAID. Eventually, guy comes over to me and he says, do you have a permit to take pictures of government? Do you have an Egyptian government permit to take pictures or videos of Egyptian government buildings? And I said, no. And he seemed to think this was his moment. And I said, but I wasn't taking video or pictures of Egyptian government buildings. I'm a U.S. citizen, and that's a United States government building. And I said, by the way, my tax dollars pay those guys salaries. And he blanched, and the security guard kind of looked at me and sort of raised an eyebrow and sort of, well, yeah, that's true, but it's beside the point. But again, I'm trying to emphasize the fact here. I'm not here doing anything that's threatening to Egypt. That's the United States government building. I'm a United States citizen. I didn't take any pictures of your military installations. I didn't even take any of ours, at least not on the surface. Or is that what that is over there, guys? I mean, it's supposed to be just a benevolence organization. So he didn't know what to do with that. And again, he was hoping to get me on some kind of espionage charge with that. So then they come out with this. They tell me that they want me to come on the other side of the barrier, enter their office, and sign an incident report, which I suspect was a confession of some kind. So my driver's the one who told me that. He had left the car, and then he came back from the car, and he says, they want you to go on the other side of the barrier. And I enter into that office and sign this thing. And I said, is it in Arabic? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, tell them that if it's in Arabic, I will be glad to look at it right here in the car. They can bring it to me. And if I agree with it, I'll sign it, provided that it's either A, in English, or B, that you're allowed to translate it for me. If it's something that I feel like is a fair summary. I drove up, violated no laws according to their own admission, and they came out and were fairly abusive. Then, okay, I'll sign that. But I knew that's not what they were going to say. Anyway, so he got out of the car and he came back and he says, it's in Arabic and they won't let me enter the building with you and they will not let me translate. And I said, well, screw that. I'm not getting out of the car. I'm not entering the building and I'm not signing anything. Again, I'm standing right here. So again, my strategy here is to force the issue. It's the only card I've got to play here. I'm going to force the issue. Either you're going to have to charge me with something, terrorism, which makes you look ridiculous, or B, espionage, which also makes you look ridiculous for reasons that I'll explain in a moment, or you're going to have to let me go because you got nothing, because I've done nothing. So I finally suggest to the guy, I say, look, if you're so worried about video, I will hold my phone and I will let you scroll it to see if you see any videos on here that you think I shouldn't have, that you don't want me to have. So he calls over a guy, and ladies and gentlemen, I kid you not, he looked just like Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury with a leather jacket and sunglasses. I found this image online. I did a Google search of Freddie Mercury, leather jacket and sunglasses, and what do you know? This is what I pulled up. I mean, he looked exactly like this. He was wearing the same kind of aviator sunglasses, and so they summoned him over, and I think he was with state security, and I'm holding the phone. I have, punched in my code where they're not looking, and I'm holding the phone, and I start scrolling. This guy starts scrolling, and he looks through my photos, videos, and he doesn't see anything there. And then he did exactly what I thought he might do. So this is the guy they thought would be tech savvy. He goes down to recently deleted and clicks on there and looks, and it's just, like pyramids and, pictures of the Nile, and the Egyptian, Cairo museum and this kind of stuff. Absolutely nothing of interest to them. And he turns to the state security guy, his superior, and he says in Arabic, nothing. Nothing. So what are they going to do now? You going to accuse me of espionage? Now, why is the espionage claim a ridiculous claim? Well, again, accusing me of terrorism or of espionage for the short term, it would give them power to treat me however they wanted to. They could, take me into some dungeon and work me over. But sooner or later, people are going to start asking questions. As I pointed out, the idea of terrorism is completely insane. Nobody's going to buy that. And the idea that I'm some sort of spy makes them look bad because it suggests there's something other than grain and rice inside that building that they don't want me to see. Do you understand what I'm trying to communicate to you here? If you're Samaritan's Purse, again, to use the analogy of a non-governmental benevolence agency like Samaritan's Purse, do you think Samaritan's Purse would care if I went into one of their warehouses and took some photos? I don't think so. Do you think if I walked into a Samaritan's Purse office and said, what do you guys do here? You think they would care? No, I don't think they would care. And by the way, I should say that their reaction here was so extreme, it was far more extreme than what you would get at the U.S. Embassy. And the U.S. Embassy should be the most heavily guarded American building in the country, along with the ambassador's residence. Those are the places, not USAID. You would think that USAID would have some security, particularly post 9/11. But if I walked into the U.S. Embassy or U.S. consulate almost anywhere in the world and I were to say, what do you guys do here? I think you'd get a reasonable answer to that question. They would say, well, we represent U.S. interests in the country and we consider visas, for locals who are trying to go to the United States. And we help Americans who are in difficult situations, and we renew passports, for people who have lost them and issue them and those kinds of things. That's what they would say. When I walked into the USAID office and I just asked, are you guys complying with the President of the United States public order to shut down? They went apeshit over that. When I asked them, what do you do here? I'm just curious, what goes on here? I'm a taxpayer, I'm just wondering. They didn't like that. So this time when I appeared, just my mere appearance on the second occasion sent them to DEFCON 1. And so some of this, I think, was payback because I had embarrassed them the first time. I had so easily breezed past their security, had breached their security, that it had embarrassed them. And so they were looking for a little bit of payback. But Egyptian state security isn't interested in any of that. It wasn't Egyptian state security that I had walked past. It wasn't even Cairo police that I'd walked past. It was the security guards that I had embarrassed. It was them, the private security employed by USAID and paid for with my tax dollars and yours that I'd embarrassed. Cairo police doesn't care anything about that. And definitely Egyptian state security doesn't care anything about that. So you see what's going on here. Eventually, what happened when they discovered that I didn't have anything on my phone, Freddie Mercury is standing there next to me, and this guy, the state security officer, is he gets a phone call, and I could see him on the phone, and his face, visibly changes negatively, and he motions to Freddie Mercury, indicates to him something, and Freddie Mercury and he have a little bit of exchange, and then Freddie Mercury comes back to me and he says in very broken English, he says, as if nothing had happened, USAID office is closed today and no one is here, so you cannot visit. We're very sorry. Thank you very much. You can go. And so we just drove away. So it seemed like the whole thing was over. But I had a feeling that it probably wasn't, because after I left, they knew where I was. They knew my name. Meaning they knew the hotel. They knew everything. They had taken pictures of my visa and so forth. But went back to the hotel, and I had a feeling that we might not be out of the woods yet. And so I left the country. And what do you know? No sooner had I left the country than I land in Prague. My plane lands in Prague, and I turn on my phone, and I'm getting messages from friends in Egypt who are telling me that Egyptian state security had come to the hotel and began interrogating people, specifically my driver, about me, about my associations in Egypt, where I had been, who I had talked to, and then they began searching the car. Now, what they were looking for isn't clear, but I suspect it's even possible that they were planting some kind of evidence, maybe some gunpowder residue or something to suggest either I had a weapon or possibly a bomb. But he truthfully, informed them when they asked him where I was. He said, gone. He's left the country. He's out of here. So that's why I could speak much more freely to you. Now, what's the upshot of all this? Well, one of the things that I want you to understand as a takeaway here is that there were three governments that were at work in this entire incident. And the first government was the authentic United States government. That's the guy that I'm talking on the phone at the U.S. Embassy. Just drive away. No, can't do that. That's the authentic United States government. Trump's government, he's empowered, but he doesn't yet have the full control of the United States government. There remains a deep state. There remains a deeply embedded element that is working against Donald Trump. So you have the authentic U.S. government. Then you have the Egyptian government. And the Egyptian government involved in this incident, I think they're just doing the bidding of someone inside USAID. And then the third thing, third government that you had involved here is the deep state, the shadow government, shadow U.S. government. And that's what was going on inside this particular building. Now, why would they respond like this? Why would the Egyptians worked so hard to please USAID in harassing me. And I think they would have arrested me had I been at the hotel when they came the next morning for me. Fortunately, I wasn't there. I had managed to slip out of the country. But why would they be doing that? Well, one theory is, of course, is that they're on the gravy train. Egypt is one of the biggest recipients of USAID monies, and they don't want that tap shut off. Furthermore, USAID was clearly not shut down, and I was reporting that it wasn't shut down. Furthermore, they didn't know what I did or didn't know. I mean, again, you don't defend a place if all this on the inside of that, and them knowing that I'm an American and not, a member of ISIS or, Al Qaeda or something. So they weren't worried about that. They knew better than that. The reason you would defend a place like that is if something really nefarious is going on the side of on the inside of that compound and inside those walls, inside that building, that they didn't want known publicly, and that they feared that I might have discovered. And then finally, there's this possibility. Is USAID Cairo involved in some nefarious stuff? Let's think about this for a second. Could be something that's related to Gaza. It could be also that Egypt is preparing for war. Now, take a look at these headlines, for example. Netanyahu has suggested, he's implying, that Egypt is indeed preparing for war. And there have been allegations that Egypt is amassing its army in preparation for war. What I can tell you is this. I mean, on the one hand, talking to friends of mine who are educated and know about these things, they say, there's no chance that Egypt would go to war with Israel. Maybe not. But I recall reading a 1911 bestseller called The Grand Illusion, in which an American by the name of Norman Angell, Angell, he had argued that a general European conflict, a war, was impossible. And he said the reason it's impossible is because all of the economies of Europe are intertwined. They're like pickup sticks. You can't move one without disturbing, all of the others. Therefore, war makes no sense. No one, Germany least of all, has anything to gain from a general European conflict. And Norman Angell, that book, again, was a bestseller. He was the toast of Europe and the toast of America right up to August 1914, when World War I began, meaning that you can't always assume that people act rationally. Angell had assumed that because war didn't make any sense to him, that it must not make any sense to the Kaiser, that it must not make any sense to the to the German General Staff. But Friedrich von Bernhardi, in his book called Germany and the Next War, Deutschland and the Next Krieg, had been saber rattling for a long time. I mean, he was the chief of the German General Staff, and he had been calling for war for quite some time. And his successor, Alfred von Schlieffen, began doing the same thing too. So again, the point that I'm simply making here is the assumption that Egypt wouldn't go to war because they can't expect, much help from Lebanon or much help from Syria, or the Saudis certainly aren't going to engage in that. Iraq is a shell of its former self, so how are they going to do this? And that's not always the way to think this through. The fact of the matter is, I could tell you that in Egypt, that two things are true at one and the same time. The population overwhelmingly supports the so-called Palestinian cause. They support the people in Gaza. They are fiercely anti-Israeli. But what's also true is they don't want a single Palestinian. They don't want any of them brought into their country. And if Trump is telling them that they're going to have to take them, but they're saying, we don't want them. We don't want any of them. And so they are working, as yet another headline says, in defiance of Trump's order. Point being is that I may very well have stumbled upon a much broader program, a much broader conspiracy, a much broader plan they don't want known. And the fact of the matter is that this is the way intelligence organizations operate. Again, I've been on loads of military installations, consulates, embassies. I know what tight security looks like. I know the way it should look. This was behavior that was extreme, and this was behavior that was acting, first of all, as I said, with a measure of spite, with a measure of, we're going to get you back because you embarrassed us. But again, that's the security guards. That's not Egyptian police. That's certainly not the secret police. Those guys were operating with a very different kind of agenda, and theirs was one of fear of what I might know, fear of what I might have on my phone, fear of what I might say, fear of who I might really be and who I might really be working for. So this is the way this entire thing went down. And forgive us for the fact that we didn't issue a Ideas Have Consequences on Tuesday, but we did want to get this out to you because we felt like this was important. And I want to end by telling you this. Evil is in retreat. It's in retreat all over the world. And ladies and gentlemen, we are winning. We are winning. This is what winning looks like. This is what it's like, when you're approaching the end game of a war. It becomes, more Germans died in the Battle of Berlin that had died throughout many battles throughout the entire war. And that's because it was the final battle. And where 500,000 Germans died there. The evil hangs on tenaciously, even though it's in retreat and even though they're losing. It does not relinquish its grip readily. So I think these are all indications that we're winning, but we want to make sure that our guard is up, that we're paying attention. But I do believe that darkness is in retreat as the light is being shined upon it, and the darkness has not overcome it. So again, I thank you for many of you who are praying for me, praying for my family, praying for my safety. And I appreciate you all. I really do. I'm so grateful for your kind comments. I'm grateful for your prayers. I'm grateful for your encouragement. I've said on Twitter a couple times that I'm exhausted, and I mean it. It feels like I'm going from one interview to the next and dealing with things that are related to what just happened. I hope to go to sleep and sleep for a week. Not sure I'm going to be able to do that anytime soon, but in my mind's eye, it greatly appeals. But right now, I am going to take my wife out for dinner, and I'm going to enjoy my evening. It's been another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton.